Sometimes it feels
Mm.
uh, like you're just drowning in information,
Yeah.
trying to drink from a fire hose.
Oh, absolutely. It's totally overwhelming.
But what if you could kind of cut through all that noise, get right to the heart of something really important, something often misunderstood?
That's exactly what we're aiming for today. We're doing a deep dive into complex post-traumatic stress disorder. You might hear it called C-PTSD.
Right.
And we're drawing heavily from the Complex PTSD Coping Skills Workbook by Tamara Greenberg. It gives a really good look at what CPTSD actually is, how it's different from, say, traditional PTSD.
Which is a big point, that difference.
Huge. And also where it comes from, how it impacts your life day to day, and maybe most importantly, ways to heal and kind of reclaim yourself.
And it's interesting, the book was written during the pandemic, wasn't it? Which was its own kind of collective trauma.
It was, yeah. And while that context is there, the message is much broader. Really, it's about building resilience
Yes.
for whatever life throws at you.
So think of this as a bit of a shortcut. Our mission today is to unpack this complex topic, maybe highlight some surprising things, and just bring some clarity to what can feel pretty overwhelming.
Let's jump in.
Okay, so PTSD. Most of us have some idea, right? Flashbacks, avoiding things, mood changes, usually linked to one specific bad event.
Exactly. That's the classic picture. Intrusive memories, nightmares, trying to avoid anything that reminds you. Changes in thinking, feeling numb, maybe.
Yeah. But CPTSD, the complex part, isn't just tacked on, is it? It points to something different.
It really does. That's where it gets, well, complex. CPTSD usually comes from trauma that was repeated, prolonged, often happening in relationships.
Ah, relational, that feels key.
It is, often starting in childhood, maybe continuing into adulthood. We're talking about things like severe neglect, maybe having someone in the house incarcerated, substance abuse.
Really difficult home environments.
Yeah, or a caregiver who was suicidal, domestic violence. These ongoing interpersonal things. And what's really tough and often missed is that having that kind of history can actually make you more likely to experience trauma later on.
Wow. And historically, this wasn't always recognized. I read it was sometimes misdiagnosed.
Oh, definitely. For a long time, complex trauma symptoms were often minimized, or worse, mislabeled as personality disorders, especially something like borderline personality disorder, BPD.
Why is that such a problem?
Well, think about it. If you label it a personality disorder, it implies the symptoms are just part of who you are, an inherent flaw.
Right, instead of a reaction to something terrible.
Precisely. It made getting the right help incredibly difficult, and it completely ignored the amazing resilience of survivors. These coping mechanisms, even if they cause problems later, they were often developed just to survive an impossible situation. They weren't fundamentally wrong.
So the way you learned to cope made sense in that environment.
Absolutely. And here's the flip side, the hopeful part. Relationships can hurt deeply, but they can also be the very place where healing happens. It's a powerful idea.
Okay, so we know it often starts with prolonged relational trauma.
Yeah.
How does that actually show up in daily life? Because it sounds like it can be pretty varied.
It really can be. And you might recognize some of these things in yourself even if you never connected them to trauma before. It goes way beyond the obvious.
Like physical stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Chronic headaches, maybe dizziness, chest pains sometimes, stomach aches. It's amazing how often the body holds on to this
The
stuff.
body keeps the score, as they say.
It really does. And then there's substance use, maybe using alcohol or drugs more than feels typical, just to numb out, escape.
Makes sense. And intrusive thoughts, like
Oh.
things you try hard not to think about.
Uh-huh. Memories, images popping up when you least expect it. And relationship patterns. That's a huge one for CPTSD. You might see a pattern of, say, being in relationships where you're mistreated but finding it really hard to leave, or just a general mistrust, even if you're not sure why.
Or the opposite, trusting too easily.
Yeah, sometimes trusting people who might actually be unsafe. It's like the dial is off, you know?
What else? Being jumpy.
Definitely. Hypervigilance. That exaggerated startle response, like jumping if someone walks up behind you, or maybe taking more risks than seems wise.
And emotional regulation.
Mm,
Feeling maybe too angry or irritable.
right. Getting feedback about being defensive, maybe. And then there's how you see yourself.
That sounds heavy.
It can be. Feeling like you're uniquely damaged or toxic somehow, or this really profound sense of not feeling real, like you're not quite human.
Wow, that's a lot.
And we also see dissociation and confusion, that feeling of being numb, spaced out,
Yeah.
which can sometimes lead to self-harm or eating disorders as ways to cope or feel something.
Memory problems, too.
Yeah, amnesia for certain events, or just this vague sense that lots of bad things happen, but the details are fuzzy, blank spaces.
So it's not just one big thing, but maybe lots of these subtle, ongoing experiences that leave you feeling fundamentally off.
That's a great way to put it. It points towards complex trauma.
Okay, let's dig into the why a bit. How does this stuff impact our actual biology? The brain, the body. You mentioned the HPA axis.
Right. We often think stress is just mental, but it's deeply physical. The body does hold on to it.
So that old fight, flight, freeze idea.
It's part of it, but the HPA axis response is a more complete picture now. It explains the physical effects more broadly. Basically, when you experience stress, it triggers your autonomic nervous system, the stuff that controls automatic things like breathing, heart rate.
Like seeing danger triggers a response.
Exactly. Evolutionarily, that was super helpful. Snake on the path. Your amygdala, the brain's threat detector, fires up, gets you ready to react.
But with PTSD, and especially C-PTSD, that system can get stuck on.
Precisely. That threat detection can happen automatically without you even consciously realizing it. If you've lived through years of trauma, that HPA axis is constantly being pinged.
So small things can feel huge, trigger big reactions.
Absolutely. It explains why something seemingly minor can set off intense emotions or physical sensations. You might feel like something's wrong with you, but it's often that system reacting automatically to a trigger.
And does that connect to the memory issues too?
It really does. That constant high stress state can actually interfere with how memories are encoded and stored. Hence, those blank spaces we talked about.
Understanding that biology.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like it could help you be kinder to yourself, right? If you're confused about why you react certain ways.
Totally. It doesn't mean you're broken or stuck. It might mean you have to work a bit harder in stressful moments, but it's not insurmountable. It's a response, not a definition.
Okay, so knowing that, let's talk about managing some of those big emotions. Fear and anger, especially in relationships. Fear seems like it could be running in the background all the time for survivors.
Very often, yeah. And maybe unrecognized. Just that constant low-level worry, scanning for threats, maybe feeling nervous, walking alone, even in safe places. Just recognizing it as fear is a huge first step.
And anger, where does that usually come from?
Often deep roots, feeling neglected, ignored, disrespected, mistreated, and the way it comes out. Well, it can sometimes make difficult situations even messier.
You mean like pushing people away?
Sometimes, yeah, like the example of Amit in the source material. He's at his friend's place for dinner, and the table isn't set how he thinks it should be.
And he gets really agitated, wants to fix the silverware.
Exactly. It's not really about the forks, right? It's about feeling internally chaotic and trying to impose order on the outside world to cope. That need for control spilling out.
That makes sense. Or the other example, Shaya.
Right. She really values her friendships, but felt her friend Winter was pulling away. Instead of maybe checking in gently, she sends these really aggressive texts, accusations, bringing up old hurts.
And it turned out the friend was going through something awful herself.
Exactly. So Shaya's reaction, driven by her own past wounds and fear of abandonment, just made a tough situation way more complicated. It wasn't really about Winter in that moment.
So how do you communicate when you're feeling triggered? How do you express those feelings without, well, making things worse?
It's tricky. One thing is to maybe anticipate how the other person might react based on past experiences. Are they likely to get defensive, angry? Just being prepared helps.
Mentally bracing yourself, maybe?
Sort of, and then try to be authentic. Use I statements. It's not about blaming, it's about sharing your experience. I feel scared when, or I feel confused when.
Like, I feel scared when you get drunk and yell at me. Or, I feel confused when you say I'm a close friend but don't ask about me.
Exactly like that. It clearly states your feeling and the behavior linked to it without making it an accusation. It opens up conversation rather than shutting it down.
But you might not always know the answer right away. Yeah. In those conflicts.
Oh, absolutely not. It's okay to say, I need some time to think about this. Being humble about not having all the answers, pausing judgments, that's part of it too. Being curious about your own mind.
Okay, let's shift gears to something really fascinating but maybe confusing. Dissociation. You mentioned it earlier as that sense of numbing or confusion.
Yeah, it's a really common human experience, actually. Daydreaming is a mild form. But for trauma survivors, it can become a much more significant coping mechanism. It's the mind's way of protecting itself by, well, disconnecting.
So what does that look like? How would you know if you're dissociating significantly?
Well, there are lots of signs. You might be really good at becoming who others want you to be, like a chameleon, or learning things super fast, getting completely absorbed in activities, almost losing time.
Being really sensitive to others' emotions.
Uh-huh. Almost like you feel what they're feeling. Sometimes dramatically different styles for different moods, like totally different outfits, a really active fantasy life. Two, not necessarily sexual, just a rich inner world.
And the memory thing again. Remembering difficult stuff, but with gaps.
Yeah, those blank spaces.
Yeah.
Or feeling like you're outside your body, watching yourself, like in a movie.
That feeling of unreality.
Multiple experiences of things feeling not real, or feeling alive, but somehow dead inside. Needing others to tell you what happened in a situation, even without substances involved.
It sounds like it could really mess with your sense of who you are.
Absolutely. Big difficulties with identity, indecision about work, life path, maybe repeating the same mistakes in relationships because you're not really present to learn from them.
Feeling self-destructive if someone gets too close.
That can happen. Difficulty telling physical sensations from emotional ones. Sleep problems are common too. Those weird experiences, falling asleep or waking up, like dreamlike hallucinations.
And that crosstalk you mentioned.
Yeah, when stressed, hearing like a background buzz of indistinct voices, not clear voices, more like chatter, and needing a lot of validation from others about your experiences.
So it protected you during trauma.
Yeah.
But what's the downside long term?
The cost can be high. It interferes with your quality of life, obviously. Memory, sense of meaning, just being able to pay attention. And critically, it can increase your risk of being victimized again. If you're checked out, you might miss danger signs or not know when to leave an unsafe situation.
Like Sheila in the book. She remembered the house decor vividly, but not the details of the assault initially. It came back in pieces.
Right. Bodily memories, fragmented dreams. She needed that safe relationship later to even start talking about it. And tragically, the dissociation was so strong, she even went back to the harmful situation later. It shows how it can override your self-protective instincts sometimes.
And relying too much on others to define your experience.
Yeah, if you're always looking outside for validation because you're disconnected from your own mind, it prevents you from truly knowing and owning your own life. But, and this is important, you decide how or if you want to address dissociation. It served a purpose, it works until it doesn't.
Okay, we've covered a lot: the roots, the symptoms, the biology, the coping mechanisms like dissociation. Now let's get really practical. How can you start to manage the overwhelm, the intrusive thoughts? What are some tools?
Right, active coping. One simple but powerful thing is distraction, but in a focused way. Pick one thing outside yourself, a tree, a picture, someone walking, and just describe it to yourself in detail. What does it look like, sound like, smell like?
Grounding yourself in the present moment.
Exactly. Or put on music something you love that isn't triggering and really listen to it. Follow the melody, the lyrics. Same with a favorite TV show or movie. Let it absorb your attention.
What about processing, not just distracting?
Journaling can work for some people. Getting thoughts out on paper, though fair warning, sometimes writing things down can make them feel too real or permanent, so see if it works for you.
Or that PowerPoint idea, making a timeline of distress.
Yeah, that client found it really helpful. It's a way to externalize it, organize the story, gain some perspective, whatever helps you structure the experience.
And flashbacks. How do you manage those when they hit?
Learning to compartmentalize can be key here. It's not about denying it happened, but about actively choosing when to engage with it. You can literally say to yourself, okay, yes, that happened. I see that memory, but I'm not in a place to deal with it right now. I'm putting it in a box until I'm safe and ready.
Taking back control of your focus.
Exactly. And if social situations are tough, planning ahead can help. If you know you're going into a group setting, think about it beforehand. How long do you want to stay? Who makes you feel safer? Have an exit strategy. Give yourself choices.
It sounds like underlying all these tools is getting to know your own mind again.
That's really the heart of it, building a relationship with yourself, knowing your authentic voice versus the trauma voice, fighting back against that feeling of identity theft that trauma can cause.
Being curious, maybe, and humble about not always knowing.
Absolutely. Curiosity about why you feel or react a certain way, without harsh judgment. And accepting that you won't always have the answers immediately. Pausing, reflecting. That's where real self-knowledge comes from.
So let's talk about getting more formal help. Therapy. When is that recommended, and how do you even find the right person?
Therapy is definitely a good idea if you want to really delve into specific traumatic events, or if something like exposure therapy seems like it might be helpful. But remember, healing isn't one size fits all. It's your journey.
But if you do decide on therapy, finding the right fit seems crucial. You mentioned a tool, the CNIP.
Yes, the Cooper-Norcross Inventory of Preferences. It's basically a way for you to figure out what you prefer in a therapeutic relationship before you start. It helps you advocate for what you need.
So it covers things like how directive you want the therapist to be.
Exactly. Do you want them to lead, or do you prefer to set the agenda? Also, emotional intensity. Do you want a closer, more personal connection, or someone more reserved?
Past focus versus present-future focus.
Right. And how much warm, unconditional support you want versus someone who might challenge you more directly to push for growth. Knowing your preferences helps you interview potential therapists.
So in that first session, you're not just being assessed, you're assessing them.
Absolutely. How do they listen? Does it feel easy to talk? Is there a good back and forth? Do you actually feel heard? Look for those moments of real empathy. You won't get all the answers in one go, but more yeses is a good sign.
And the therapist's overall approach matters too, right? Not just being stuck in one method.
Oh, totally. You want someone with a diverse toolkit. You know the saying, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Right. If they only do one thing, they might try to fit you into that box, even if it's not right.
Precisely. They need to be able to pivot if something isn't working for you. Approaches like person-centered or humanistic therapy are great because they focus on you as a whole person, your strengths, and building that empathetic relationship for growth.
It sounds like you need to be pretty assertive then in therapy.
It helps. It's tough switching therapists, emotionally draining to start over, but staying in a bad fit isn't helpful either. Be clear about practical things too, fees, insurance, cancellations right from the start. Treat it professionally.
Okay, beyond therapy, what about support networks? You really stress not putting all your eggs in one basket, right? Widening the circle.
Yes, hugely important. Think of it like needing different tools for different jobs. Your best friend might be great for emotional support, but maybe not for practical advice or vice versa. No single person can meet all your needs.
So relying only on close family or one friend isn't enough.
Often not, especially when you're doing the hard work of healing. You need a broader base. Think about casual friends, old colleagues, maybe a spiritual leader, a former mentor, even distant relatives you connect with.
Getting creative with connections.
Exactly. Could
Yeah.
you grab lunch with that acquaintance you like? Ask someone from your coffee shop meetup group to hang out? The more diverse your network, the more resilient you are when things get tough. More anchors.
Okay, moving into some really crucial and sometimes difficult areas. Substance use. We touch on it as a coping mechanism.
Yeah, very common for survivors. It offers that numbing, that escape. But the risk is it becomes automatic, maybe even leads to addiction, especially if you have that biological vulnerability.
And it gets in the way of healing.
Significantly.
Good.
It makes it really hard to do the work of reclaiming yourself, of building that relationship with your own mind and feelings if you're constantly reaching for something external to check out. It keeps you stuck.
When it comes to treatment, there's often talk about abstinence versus moderation.
Right. For some people, especially if they tend towards all or nothing thinking or find their use leads to more risky behavior, an abstinence-based approach can be really helpful. Things like 12-step programs, AA, based on the Big Book, offer that peer support sponsor system. It's available almost everywhere.
But it's not for everyone.
No, definitely not. But for those where moderation just doesn't seem to work, where use feels compulsive, it's a strong, structured option worth considering.
Now, a really vital topic, suicidal thoughts. If someone listening is experiencing that, what's the most important message?
First things first, get professional help. Now, seriously, if you're having thoughts of suicide, even if you don't have a plan or intent, please reach out. Get a therapist, or if you have one, you must talk about this.
Even if it's hard to bring up.
Especially if it's hard, take charge. Your therapist should ask, but don't wait. Bring it up yourself. Your life is too important.
And you mentioned a safety plan as a practical tool.
Yes,
Right.
a written plan, something you create ideally when you're not in crisis and keep with you. It outlines steps to take, people to call, things to do to keep yourself safe when those thoughts get overwhelming. In that moment of crisis, it's so hard to think clearly. The plan helps you access the part of you that wants to live. It's like a lifeline back to safety.
What about basic self-care in those dark times? Does it help?
It's foundational. Often, thoughts of dying can signal deeply unmet needs. Restorative sleep is non-negotiable. Sleep deprivation makes everything worse, especially mood. And look at your diet limiting junk, sugar, increasing whole foods. That gut-brain connection is real. It's not a cure-all, but neglecting these basics makes climbing out of that hole much harder.
And leaning on that support system again.
Absolutely. Who can you call? Not necessarily just for deep talk, maybe just for distraction. Someone to remind you you're not alone. Even people not in your absolute inner circle can be part of that safety net.
As we start to wrap up this deep dive,
Hmm.
wow, we've covered a lot. It's clear that confronting complex trauma is incredibly hard work.
It really is. There's no minimizing the struggle. But it's also crucial to remember the strengths you already possess. Just by surviving, you've developed skills.
Like what?
Like mentalization, that ability to understand your own mind and others, to think emotionally, empathy, even if it feels buried sometimes, insight into patterns, ways you've learned to manage overwhelming emotions. These are already tools in your kit.
So even though the stress response, that HPA axis, might still get triggered.
It probably will under stress. That's biology. But you've learned so much, gained tools through this process, or maybe through listening today. You can continue to heal and integrate these experiences. It's an ongoing journey.
And finding the right support, whether it's a therapist who really gets it or building that wider network, that seems key to the journey.
Absolutely. And part of that journey, especially for a trauma survivor, is learning to be discerning, cautious about who you let close, who earns your trust.
Listening to your gut.
Yes, trusting your instincts, knowing when a relationship isn't serving your healing, and having the courage to let it go, to make space for people who will nourish you and support your growth. That's not selfish, it's essential self-care.
Okay, let's leave our listeners with one final thought to chew on. Something for the material.
Yeah, this one is powerful. It can be incredibly hard after everything you might have been through to feel like you actually deserve a good life. Maybe people in your past didn't care or actively didn't want you to be happy.
That's a heavy reality for some.
It is. But the thought is this. You're an adult now. You have agency. And the universe, whatever you conceive that to be, it doesn't punish people for finding joy or pleasure. There isn't a limited supply of good things. There is enough to go around. And you absolutely deserve your place in a good life.